So we could look at the Hermetic tradition and we could look at how these chains come into being. So there's 7 principles. You've probably come across them elsewhere. There's the principle of mentalism, right? There's the principle of all things are a mental projection. Everything is essentially a mental reality that then goes through a series of processes and gets experienced as physicality. And then there is I like to call it the coordinating principle, which is that all things are in correspondence with other things, and that there are these proverbially secret correspondences between things that connect them, chains of correspondence, right? So there are these correspondence chains that connect all things to other things. And I want you to also, looking at the first principle, that the first principle is the proverbial chain, that all things that exist, that can be considered, that can be realized, that can be experienced, are essentially mental objects, mental concepts, mental reality. And that all of these aspects of the mental reality are in a state of total unity within the first sphere, within the first principle of Hermes. In this plane of mentalism, there can be no division. There can be no separation. There can be nothing removed from the mentalist sphere. There can be nothing changed. So essentially what we're looking at here is a changeless, fixed state of being. How does this equate to these moving, shifting, transforming realities that we're living in and through in this world? And when we look at the mentalist, it's quite simple, really. Namaste, Mexico. I hope you're good, smiling, and thriving. So within this mentalist sphere, we've got all things from every aspect bound within a proverbial chain of unity. I want us to consider it. This is why there can be no division, why there can be no change, why there can be nothing removed from it or nothing added to it, why it never changes in any aspect, because it already has all the possible changes that can ever have, will have happened, will happen, are all within the embryonic form of the first principle of Hermes, already active. Think about that for a moment. So everything is so profoundly chained to each other in a state of perfect unity that it represents the Sastra chakra. Thank you, whoever did that. Yeah, people, don't be scared to share this live and to crank a like onto it. I forget. So all things are bound within the Sastra chakra, and if you look at the Sastra chakra, it's traditionally 1,000-petaled lotus or 96 petals, and each petal is a different color, representing all the possible qualities that could be part of this changing world of continuity, of shifting possibilities that change in total flux. But all are bound within that one lotus. And so all the changes that we experience are these 1,000 petals, possibilities, mixed in different variations and continually mixing in different variations, different patterns, different combinations in order to create a different reality. And all of these very subtle shifting dials that are spinning within each other, we consider these the turning of the proverbial wheels of life, are moving through all the other chakras. So when we look at this, it's quite an interesting concept when you really get right down to it and you focus on it. The first principle, the Sastra chakra, is the chakra of Samadhi. It is the fundamental. It is where we are ready to transcend all form, all aspects of form, all aspects of change, all aspects of growth, and enter into the primordial state of being, which is the pure state of the causal reflection, that which came before the soul. Excuse me. There we go. Wow. So that's what causes that sound. Interesting. Just checking that it stopped. So this causal change of sound and vibration and movement and energy that we experience are the different permutations of something that is bound in an infinite, eternal chain of perfection. That's the first principle of Hermes, the plane of mentalism. The second aspect is the correspondence chains that chain all things to other things in sequences of correspondence. And the deeper we go into the recognition of the correspondence chains and the realization, we realize that there are maps within maps within maps of maps within maps, and different fractal relationships and versions of the ways in which these chains fit together. We call this quantum entanglement. This is a chain of static movement that produces all of the variations of the unity. Why the monad becomes the duad and the triad and all of these things. And then there is the vibration. Now, a vibration is a chain of sounds. A chain of sounds cascading one after another in a sequence. And this chain of sounds becomes the vibrational, manifestational way in which the mental sphere is able to reflect into the physical through this correspondence chains set up by the quantum entanglement field, which are the principle of correspondence. And so we see this vibrational chain reflecting this chain of correspondences, all manifesting the infinite static chain of being. And these three principles then recombine. And in the recombination of these three principles, we then get the polarity. Now, the polarity is very interesting. This is what exists between the chain links. Where one link in a chain meets another link in a chain, we have a polarity. Where that other chain links another link in a chain, we have a polarity. I want you to think of circuits in series. Circuits in series. And so circuits in series reflect this principle of polarity, which is the fundamental structure of the chain's connections. Then the next Hermetic principle is the principle of rhythm. Now, rhythm reflects how these patterns cascade and repeat themselves, because there has to be repetition. There are only so many aspects within the Sastra chakra, within the mentalism sphere, that are being quantum entangled to produce all these alternative possibilities, which are then bound in this vibrational field of chain of sounds, which is then held together by the polarities. The polarities holding it together create distinction, create silence between the sounds. And so we have these patterns that reflect the polarities. And these patterns can then be observed as rhythm. So rhythm is how these chains are structured. Polarity is how these chains are bound. And these three aspects also combine to form cause and effect. The causal loop, that the first link in the chain leads to the next link in the chain, that leads to the next link of the chain, which is a reflection of the polarity and the rhythm, which is binding all three of these other aspects in the chain, so that we know that the one chain link connecting to the other chain link is going to produce the next chain link, and it will be as per the golden phi ratio, right? So the addition of this chain and this chain will add up to form the next chain. link. And the addition of the next chain link and the next chain link will add up to form the next chain link. And this is how phi works. So the cause and effect principle is the culmination of these three chains that are firstly connected by the polarizing power, structured by the rhythmic essence, and completed by the cause and effect, in order that every chain links to the chain after it, so that this perfect mathematics can become a structure that we experience life through. When all these chains come back into synthesis, we realize that the two principles on either side of the middle link of the chain are becoming a union within the link of the chain. And so we have the masculine and the feminine principles, which is effectively the polarity, which is a reflection of the correspondence, because there's a certain relationship between polarity and correspondence. In the same way that there's a certain relationship between vibration and rhythm. In the same way that there's a relationship between mentalism and polarity. And when we start to conceptualize this, between mentalism and cause and effect, because the effect becomes the cause and the cause becomes the effect. So we've got a static dynamic relationship. The fundamental structure is static, but it reflects itself as dynamic. And this is because of these six principles, which is why we see the hexagon as being so important, and the cube of Saturn, and the Anahata chakra, the hexagon, the Merkabah, being central to many of the spiritual traditions. And we look at the zodiac and we see these 6 planets around the central planet. And this is why we've adhered to this notion of sacred number 7. And then the generation is the next octave of the entire spectrum, whereby all these separate parts are put back together again. So we have the one fundamental mentalism that splits off to become 5 fingers of a hand, which makes 6 principles. And then the 5 fingers of the hand contract back towards a state of unity, so that the generation becomes the consummation of all of the 3 first principles within a structure, binding it through the 3 principles that follow it in order to become the 7th principle. So what we're looking at here are 7 principles in a chain, each principle itself a chain, because the 7th principle of generation chains all the other 6 principles together. And it is the chaining principle. So we see that in life, everything works like this: circles, chakra, as they say in India. Everything is moving in cycles: the moon, the sun, the seasons, birth, youth, maturity, old age, passing from the world. These cycles are all a dynamic path, a dynamic passage through being that brings us into a state of recognition. Listen to the word recognition. Recognition. So a cog is a central thing that turns a what? A chain, right? Cogs turn chains, that's what they do. And the chain turning around the cog produces nishan. What is nishan? Nishan is, it's relating to fire, because the n represents transformation, nun, the transformative potential, which is rather fundamental, the fish. Namaste, dear Rob. I hope you're good. Hope you're well. It's been a while, brother. How's the British Isles treating you? So cognition, this nishan, the nun, the fish in the beginning represents transformation. It represents the seed that produces time. T represents the Tau cross, represents time's fundamental axis. E represents that high potential, which is a reflection of the mentalist principle. We see it as Virgo. It's very much within the mental domain of mindfulness and the activations of the mental body, and is drawn as a sperm in the old glyphs, which represents the beginning, the virgin, Virgo. And so it then represents this virgin potential, which is a beginning of something that holds time, ignite, ion. And an ion is once again bringing this dynamic expression of this beginning principle of the sperm, of Yod, into its wheel of transformation, where the O represents the nail that connects the I to the N. So we have ion. And an ion is thus a valence shift. And the shifting valencies of ions has got to do with the movement of energy from one state or one frequency or vibration to another. So ignition means to start the process, right? And so cognition is that continuity of the turning of the mental sphere that keeps all the wheels turning, that produces this reality through the mental sphere of thinking and experiencing the emotional plane, that is the spiritual reflection of life that becomes manifest through us, through our beings. So when we look at how these words fit together, we see them reflecting and binding these 7 principles. Namaste, much love, Dustin. How are you doing? Are you good? Are you good? I hope you're all well. I hope you're all thriving. Mexico, I hope your pizza madness is going well, by the way. Mexico's making pizza madness. So Mexico's in and out in pizza heaven, I'm sure. I still have yet to taste one of those amazing pizzas. And so these cogs are turning the chains that churn thought. And notice I say churn. We've got these ancient stories about churning the milk, churning the oceans in order to produce the potentials for life to come into being. And so we can see how the 7 principles are a chain of chains that become the chains of life. On one level, from a conceptual chain of associations, I have created a series of associations and I've bound them in a chain for your consideration. I want you to consider that for a moment. So the way that the mind works, the way the communication works. Communication is expressing the chain of correspondences. Mercury. So Mercury relates to this principle of correspondence. For baby spiders all over my desk. They're going to be crawling in my pants today. If you see me jumping up, it's because I'm getting bitten in unholy places. No, every place is holy, even when you get bitten there by a spider. Baby spiders are more likely to bite than big ones because they haven't learned not to bite. What a concept. You've got to love them, though. They're so cute. And they are teaching me to become free of the fear of spider venom. So it's binding me to a chain of fearlessness. You see, we are bound through chains of fear. Okay, so now let's move out of the pure conceptual into the less abstract and into the more concrete physicality that we find ourselves living in. The most fundamental chain that I can think of is the chain of fear. And the chain of fear is such that none escape it. Everybody is afraid of something. Even when something is nothing, it becomes a thing. Because the mind tends to create objects, thought objects. Excuse me while I light my frankincense. To create a chain of beautiful odors that will feed my consciousness with terpenes to stimulate the chains within my endocannabinoid system and allow myself to become aware of the more subtle connections between different aspects of being and of thinking. So, yeah, I love frankincense. So the chain of fear is a big one. I was very lucky as a child that I got to experience the beginnings of my fear consciously. And so there's a timestamp for me at a point where fear began. Before then, I didn't have my own fear. It wasn't mine. I didn't own it. Fear relates to ownership, right? What does ownership relate to? If something is your own, it is only yours. I want you to consider this for a moment. If it is only yours, it is not shared by the chain, conceptually. You have taken it out of the chain and said, this is no longer part of the chain. I own this. This is mine. I have mined it from the depths of these chain reactions that chain us to being and claimed it as my own. So when you own something, you become an island and you become disassociated from the chain. And that leads to people wanting to put up big walls and doors and fences. And here in South Africa, electric fences and sharp points on walls, and make sure that no one else can come into your own domain where everything that you own is, because you're all on your own in this little reality that you're sculpting for yourself, in denial of the chain of being. When you look at the indigenous cultures like the Khoisan culture, they don't have ownership. Everything's part of a chain. We are part of a chain. Nature's the chain. Every part of nature is part of a chain that connects us to this chain. How can I own this? You can't own this animal. They didn't understand the concepts of ownership in South Africa. It's one of the reasons why they got done in, sadly, because they would see these buffalo and these cows and these bulls and this livestock. Namaste, dear Lauren. How are you? How are you doing? Lovely to see you here. Yeah, one of the reasons they got done in. You're right. And the disassociation does happen so easily. We're all disassociated to a point. This is part of reassociation, I believe. Part to becoming once again healthy, to getting back in track. There's Mexico. Welcome back. How's the pizza madness treating you? I hope you're enjoying. And sounds like a lovely idea, doesn't it? Pizza madness. And it's not the bad kind of pizza. It's the homemade, the good stuff. The good stuff. So this idea of a chain, hot, ooh la la, I like hot. I'd probably like have a bowl of chilies next to it. Your day being a bit emotional. It's a very intense time because the sun is playing hiri kiri with our emotional bodies and nature and cycles. Like I've seen the snakes doing things that they haven't been doing. Today I observed a snake in the bush right next to the path. They're not normally there. I had to show my son. I was like, come here and check this out. Under these leaves, there's a puff adder. I reckon it's a puff adder by the sound, the way it moved. I'm quite tuned into what's going on around me when I'm in the wild. I used to live in the jungle, so survival is a big thing. If you're paying attention, you survive. If you don't, when you've lived in the jungle, you tend to become very tuned in to what's going on. So I've noticed this, Lauren, there's big shifts, big changes happening energetically, and the sun is behind us. And the sun is the reflection of this chain of life of prana that connects us. When we'll get into the sun's chain, that will be the next chain to look at. But where was I? Yeah, these associations that connect us, to this to this fear that basically disconnects us from the proverbial chain is what defines our modern society in my eyes. And it's what creates much of the malady and the problems and the psychological illnesses from which we all fundamentally suffer to greater and lesser degrees. And I do get this impression that, this is meant to be the way it is because we are in this proverbial Kali Yuga. And so disassociation is part of the process of reintegration. And so this disintegrity, integration, integrity, we're noticing a lot of lies. Disintegrity, disassociation, fear, they're all fundamentally connected. Lies lead to disassociation, leads to disintegrity, leads to more fear. And so there's a chain between fear, dishonesty, disintegrity. You're either going to be who you are, you're going to be authentic, you're going to be yourself, you're going to be genuine. If you're being yourself, genuine and authentic, you'll be less fearful because there'll be less to fear. Every time we wander away from our truer place of being, we become a little more fearful. Yeah. It's difficult losing a family member, dear Lauren. But when we lose them, we gain them. It's a weird concept. Though in the moment of losing them, it's hard and it's sore and it's painful. And then at some point, we realize they are like living within us, part of our ancestral chain. But yeah, I still feel the pangs when I think about my father. And yeah, it will always be a part. Well, my condolences to you and your dad, and I hope you find beauty in the world, because I'm sure that's what would be wanted and desired for you, to find joy and beauty. That's, funnily enough, the best way to honor those that have walked beyond us. And time is seemingly so constructed as such a linear chain of events. But time in itself has a series of correspondences within the chain of time's causal unfoldment. And when we start to really look at time, there's more going on there than what meets the eye, the personal eye. and what we see and experience. And the eyes represent rhythm. Understanding the rhythms of life gives us a perspective. So big love to you, Lauren. Big hugs. Yeah, she would be. This is how this works. God bless you. Yeah, this ancestral chain is what connects us to ourselves. And so we have this fear chain that disconnects us from ourselves into our own little pockets of ownership. And then we want to compensate for the fear by owning things, owning our own belief system, owning our own possessions, owning our own place to live, owning our own, ownness, who we are. We want to define the limits of who and what we are. We want to know who we are. And so this disconnection from fear becomes a closed loop that chains us back to the beginning, because we will end up wanting to own who we are. And that will end up forcing us to recognize how we disconnected from the chain in our minds. We were never disconnected, but we repressed or suppressed the recognition and the consciousness and the awareness of the connection. So there's a lot to unpack when we look at this, really, when we consider this in its most fundamental, perspective. I think there's so much to take apart in these ideas of how these chains fit together. And there is no getting away from it. It is what it is. So fear, phi, air, the error of phi, because phi gives us free will. And big love to you, Rob. Hope your mom's well. Learning coding. Have you been in touch with Dave? How is old Dave? Have you heard from him? Who knows? So big love to you, man. Namaste, dear brother Cosmic.
A little early today.
What an honor to have you. Yeah, it's every day. It's 1 hour earlier. I hope it's the right time. No, it must be the right time because it came on YouTube, so it must be the right time. I heard the other computer going on in case I made a mistake. The time zones change with where you guys live.
Mm-hmm.
We've got dear brother Cosmic here.
And you have your own daylight savings time.
Yeah, we don't have daylight saving time. We just are standard time.
Right.
Africa, there's no different time. It's just time. It's pretty cool when you live here and you don't have to deal with clock changes. So we've got dear brother Cosmic here, and Cosmic is he's connected to a chain of beings, right? And with this chain of beings, he's channeling a chain of correspondences that, when you put them together, gives one a chain of concepts that can understand how the world is put together. So I'm sure the idea of this chain of life is going to be right up Cosmic's alley. Cosmic's a really wonderful brother with a very unique way of looking at things. And it's a total honor to have you here. Welcome, dear brother. Tell us a few words about yourself and jump into the discussion.
Yeah, man. So basically, a lot of this stuff I probably mentioned before in other chats that I channel the Fae and whatnot, and the whole idea with the kind of chain of correspondence is I think of everything in terms of bubbles and reflections from different bubbles, and but by bubbles they mean kind of more like dimensional spheres, like stuff we already kind of exist in, but we don't really notice.
You still with us, yeah?
Yeah,
that wasn't
I'm still with you.
Good.
That was my
lovely. Just checking. because there have been like internet things going on. It might be my end that like my internet's fallen off. Yeah, you're completely right. 90% of reality we don't notice. 90% of everything that's going on inside of us we don't notice, which is really interesting. You meet someone on the road and have a conversation with them, and you don't notice what shoes they're wearing or the nuances or the subtle things. And the more we start paying attention, the more we start creating attention, we tighten the links of the chain of consciousness so that it can bind the information more tightly. Tension, tightly bound bits of information so that we can take in more information, hold, become more saturated. This is what attention is, creating tension on the chain of thought and perception. And so, sorry to hear about your mom having Parkinson's, dear Rob. It's a tough one. I looked after people with Parkinson's. It's not an easy one. It's not an easy one at all, brother. I know that story only too well. Looked after a lot of people with Parkinson's and MS as well. They're similar in a way. So yeah, this chain of fear separates us. The chain of love, okay. The chain of love connects us. So we've got these opposing chains, the chain of fear and the chain of love. And when we surrender to the chain of love, we become connected to everybody we love. And everybody that loves us feels connected to us. And so we start to recognize our connections when we love. When you meet a woman and you fall in love, well, what is this love that you're feeling? Think about that for a moment. What is this love? What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. Was there a track like that?
Yeah, that's
yeah.
the Night at the Roxbury's track.
There you go. You would be much more clued up to tracks. I just hear the music. I don't know. Don't really follow much. But
I hear that song, like I always think of it like in a very literal sense, like there's like a baby holding up a gun to the man singing, "Baby, don't hurt me." Don't hurt me. My mind does stuff like that. I just invent new stories for things.
That's an interesting one, though, because that's exactly sort of what it is. Because when we become aware of the chain of love, we become vulnerable. We drop our defenses. Our defenses, right? Ensis being end, but a continuity of ends.
Fences.
Ensis. Yeah? You have an end with a structure, or you have an ensis, which is like the endings that are all continually endings, but never quite ending, but ensis. So ensis is when we become deaf to these cycles running out. And I think it's got to do with the way in which the toric field runs through its end, but it never gets to the end, does it? Just as it's getting to the end, it's beginning. So the end you never reach the end. The end is lost in the beginning. It's the toric field. It's the way of the consciousness field and manifestation. So when we become deaf to this toric field's mechanisms, we put up walls and block ourselves from this connection. But love is that chain that connects us. And we drop this deafness and we start to listen, really listen. And, we get that the series of correspondences between us and who we love becomes clear. We start noticing the similarities. We start noticing that we're all different and unique, but we're alike in this way, and we're alike in this way, and we're alike in this way. And so when a man and a woman are in love for a long time, they start to look like each other. They start to sound like each other. They might almost start behaving in similar ways. because we become so ingrained in this chain of sharing. We start recognizing aspects of you within me and aspects of me within you, which is what draws us together. This recognition that there is this chain of life connecting us all. So that the chain of fear and the chain of love. What do you think of the chain of love, dear Cosmic? I'd love to hear your impression.
It's interesting you think of it as a chain. I guess love can be kind of sometimes I think of it maybe in a different way, where it's not something that is a chain, but something that kind of releases us from said chain. Because I think that in a lot of ways, love has a kind of like to me a sort of looseness, a sort of it's the sense that when somebody like really loves you, it's that they let you really be yourself. And when you're around somebody who doesn't love you, you have to kind of get yourself guarded up. You have to almost be like, if you have like a terrible partner, or you got a terrible boss or something like that, you got to like become really defensive. You become a different person, or you're at a social gathering and maybe the people there are kind of jerks, and you have to be in a situation where it's formal and you got to be kind of a little bit superficial, and you got to be kind of like, yak it up and pretend to be nice. But when somebody just allows you to really be who you are without any kind of pretenses, it just lets you sort of open up. I think that's what sort of love really is. I think too, one of the things, one of my main guides sort of tells me is that not the Fae, but like, I don't know, just call it sort of the divine feminine, if you will. But that true love is never forced onto anyone. It always comes to one of free will and volition. And because I think that when love is forced, it becomes hurtful, it becomes harmful, it becomes essentially rape, essentially. So I think that those are sort of my thoughts.
No, absolutely. When I say the chain of love, I mean links of freedom. Each link is a link of freedom. And so we can be chained to freedom. I want us to consider this idea of being chained to freedom for a moment. And by the chain, I'm sort of looking at the links. Love creates more links between us, between people, as opposed to separating them. It brings them together. It brings them together in natural and organic ways where they feel that magnetism drawing them closer. Like, we want to see our families. We want to see our loved ones. We want to make sure that they're safe and they're okay. If something's happening to our loved ones, it's very traumatic for us. Namaste, Vincent. How are you? Are you good? The Chain, Fleetwood Mac. Old school, man. Old school. Yeah, definitely old school, man. Good one. So, yeah. So I see this when I speak of chain of love. I mean, and it is a chain in a sense, because there's a certain kind of freedom that you have when you don't love. But when you love, there is responsibility. Like, you feel responsible to make sure that person's safe, to look after that person. It's a moral chain of events. You don't want to do anything to impose harm. You want to impose joy, if you must impose. Namaste, dear brother Indy. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Honored to have you on the show. Dear brother Indy is a shadow worker. He helps people look into their shadow chains so they can work out the kinks in the links of their shadow and bring that natural flow into being. He's also been through a lot of interesting life events, which has made him strong in a gentle way, and does a lot of research into ancient things, obviously occult and spiritual sciences, but also into ancient histories and etymology and various different schools of thought. We're all an interesting bunch. Namaste, dear brother. do say a few words about yourself and jump right in, and it's an honor to have you.
Namaste. So glad to be here today. Yes, Franklin mentioned I'm very much an eclectic mystic. I've got a bachelor's degree in psychology with a minor in philosophy. Since my graduation, my commencement from higher learning, I've been doing a lot of self-education, and I've been doing a lot of work in paleontological anthropology, the evolution of the human race, and I've been looking into all of the mythology involving the origins of mankind. And I've been working on my blog page, been doing some boots on the ground research in the area on some archaeological sites that are kind of off the beaten path of academia, kind of fringe stuff, some things regarding giants, things that are outside of the academia historical dating that seems a little bit older than it's supposed to be. So I've been doing a lot of stuff locally. I've been researching a lot of stuff globally, and this all kind of started with a out-of-body experience that I had in the year 2000 that kind of drove me to really follow my passions and start to really listen to the answers that were shown to me and find them here on the ground. So it's going to be a really great experience being here on the round table, and I look forward to getting into the chain of life today. So it's going to be pretty cool. Just to put in a little blurb on that, I know that I study a lot of ecology as well. I'm very much a nature lover, and in as much as people have a hard time with these creatures, little bugs that irk people. Oftentimes it's spiders and bees and snakes and such. I really respect those creatures, the venomous creatures that are so small and conjure up so much fear in us. So, but there's a lot of things that irk me, like mosquitoes and flies and such. But I know that those are like the foundation of the chain of life. So without those, we couldn't have the frogs, wouldn't be eating much, and without the frogs, what would the alligators eat and such? So
that being said, you're still allowed to be pissed off at mosquitoes. Even the Fae tell me that just because you're aligned with nature doesn't mean you can't be annoyed by it once in a while. Because if you think about the animals are annoyed by it too. Sometimes they don't.
So
the horses, the antelope, they don't like getting dealing with flies either. So in that way, we're all kind of connected. We're all equally annoyed by mosquitoes.
Yeah. But as it was frankly stated in a video I watched recently, that kind of like Carl Jung said, without firm roots, your branches can't grow. And so without the things in the darkness and the things that we dislike, we can't have the things that we love. And so I think that connects a lot to Buddhism in the sense that without suffering, we can't have joy. And so I think there's a lot of those things that are kind of foundational are things of that cause suffering, unfortunately. But the human species has worked immensely at trying to eradicate mosquitoes because they cause malaria, which has been detrimental to our species in the equatorial range and tropical regions. And they found that stinky cheese is more appealing to these mosquitoes than us. So if you're in those regions, get your hands on some stinky cheese.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
maybe it's because people's feet smell a bit like stinky cheese.
Yeah. Two types of mosquitoes: the ones that go for upper areas, and then there's ones that go for your ankle. The ankle biting ones, so you can get off your back with that cheese.
They think they're going after people's feet, but psych. Nah. I always think of mosquitoes as the great vaccinators. And I think that's where the idea of vaccines came from originally. Because they get small little bits of disease and they give you a manageable amount of disease or illness from someone else or from some other mammal or creature. They give you just enough disease that your body can recognize, hey, that's a foreign particle. Like, let's put it in our database.
Yeah.
And then when that thing comes down, no. We know you. We know you. We got your number. Come, guys, let's start building up like retrofit this organism to like repel this thing. So, in a sense, like we ought to be grateful to mosquitoes because they really make us healthy. It's such a weird concept. This is how I've always felt about them. And ever since I felt that way, I never had a problem with them. Isn't that weird? Here's an interesting thing that I noticed. When we don't have a big problem with mosquitoes, our body doesn't have a problem with their bites.
Intentions go so far.
Yeah, it's like if we have a problem with the creature, when they bite us, we react to their toxins.
Honestly, with mosquitoes, I think it's actually the noise they make that irritates me more than the actual bite. And the interesting thing about a mosquito bite is that it only itches if you notice it's there. Like sometimes you'll get a bite, you'll forget about it, it won't itch, but the second you see it, it starts itching.
Oh yeah, that's true.
This is it.
I always hated the noise too. It's pretty obnoxious. But I learned I had to be out in a shed one time when I was trying to give out stamps for people that were coming to see these caves at the ice caves up in New Hampshire, and the mosquitoes were just coming to hunt me all day. And I learned that I can use their sound to find them, and I can get them. And so I learned to be able to get them in the air before they reach me. But if they ever touch me, I was able to get them before they put their proboscis in. I got very fine-tuned to being able to get them, and I'll pile them up into piles of hundreds of them just to show all the people there how good I am at it. But at first, I came out with bites everywhere, and I had to learn. So, that their noise is very obnoxious, but it can be useful to get those little buggers.
Yeah, the funny thing about the sound.
Yeah,
I found the sound interesting.
it's only the
This it reminds me of astral sounds. It's like an almost ethereal sound. It's like a kind of a musical instrument, like a violin,
Yeah. Right.
I guess I don't really like violins much either. So I guess that's consistent.
Yeah.
Not everybody's gonna like violins. Maybe you had a bad experience once. You had a neighbor with a violin that really shouldn't have had one.
I don't, I was thinking about it, like why? Because sometimes I like kind of ask myself, like, why I like and don't like certain things. And if you think about it, like, what is it about the sound of a violin? And really, if you think about it, it's tension. It's tension between strings. It's like you're scraping a string on top of another string, and it's like the string is like screaming in a way. So that's kind of, I don't know. I was just thought that was an interesting idea I had last night.
I think that's probably why they use violins in horror films a lot.
Like in classical, one thing I noticed about like classical music is it's so incredibly tense, and like everything is so like big and bombastic, and it's like you'll talk about culture and psyops and like mind control. Like think about classical music and like what kind of psychological effect that has on the population, and all like the way, and you think about the idea of classical music, it's everybody sort of like playing the exact same melody and at the exact same time, and they're all doing an orchestration. They're just following the sheet music, and you got the strings and the horns, and they're all physical instruments. That's another thing that's kind of interesting. Like I always have a weird affinity more for electronic sounds, because to me, I mean, a lot of people would say that electronic sounds are kind of like, unnatural because they're made from like computers. But to me, it's like a pure, unfiltered sound wave, just a pure square wave, pure sine wave. And it's like, for some reason, I kind of vibe with that more. I don't know why that is.
Have you ever heard about this, Cosmic? They say that maybe because nowadays when we're born, they put us in these incubator rooms with these beeping noises for like a couple days, that we're more in tune to the sounds of technology than we are to the sounds of nature or like natural instruments.
Maybe, but then again, if you think about it, maybe that mimics the sound of nature. Birds chirping, and it's almost like that's like you think of the birds chirping and the insect sounds. That's almost like if like nature was a computer, that would be its bloops and bleeps. I love bloop bleep sounds. That's kind of like with my weird kind of contradiction. It's like I love nature, but man, I love electronic sounds. I think it's just because it's like it's a sound that it's otherworldly. That's why I like it. It's like it's something that's from beyond. I think that's kind of like with most electronic music. It's like they just kind of make something kind of loud and clubby. But I like kind of like the older stuff, like from like the 1970s, where they had those old Moog synthesizers with all the knobs and dials, and their whole approach was like, let's try to find new sounds and explore new psychic astral territories using this instrument almost as a kind of a magical instrument. But I don't know, some people they don't have that insight when it comes to music. They just kind of use it to like copy other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. That thing that's really exciting is that there's always a new sounds. And with each new sound, you come up with like new genres and subgenres and stuff, which is pretty exciting. But with the guitar, they've always kind of done that with the guitar. They had the acoustic guitar, then the electric guitar, then like the heavy metal guitar, then like all these different pedals and stuff. They can do a lot with a guitar, but like other instruments, really not so much. But yeah, there's something there. I love electronic music personally too. But I'm kind of a Luddite, so it doesn't really agree with my lifestyle that much and like my values, but I just love it. It really gets me.
This is a very interesting topic and a conversation in itself as part of the fundamental conversation that we are discussing here. And I find it rather interesting because, like, just to step back to what was being said about, and I hope my audio, is it okay? Is it clear?
Yeah, fine.
I like what you were saying earlier, and the music thing I think is also a reflection of a chain that connects us to each other. So music is a conceptual chain of patterns and rhythms and tones that connect people to each other on an emotional frequency, which is really interesting if we think of the chain of music and how we create chains of different instruments that are all chained together in the same piece to produce peace in a piece, working discordant glitches out of the system, using sounds to create certain kinds of effects and reverberations to shift our consciousness back to a point of peace, relaxation, and enjoyment. But getting back to the insects, this is a very highly shamanic concept that we are connected to the animal kingdom, what you were talking about earlier, Indy, and that these insects that we hold so much regard for, be it fear, whatever the regard for, they're somehow so intrinsically powerful and so much a part of our psyches. We don't realize it. And we have this rather fundamental connection, like you say, with spiders. People are afraid of them. And it's like an inherent primal fear because we don't understand them. They've got a level of awareness that we can't grasp. They're seeing aspects. I was just talking about having a little spider. It was a baby, one of the baby ones that are like they get big, they get bigger. But so we've got this sort of fundamental fear of these creatures on us, and it's in us, it's a part of us. And I like recognized my fear started with a scorpion with my mom. Before then I didn't have fear. So I associated all fear with scorpions as a 5-year-old when first experienced fear for myself as my own fear. And it was sort of imported into my system. And so there's something quite powerful that connects us to these small creatures. And these tiny creatures, snakes is another one. People are so afraid of snakes. I've never understood this fear of snakes personally. I just couldn't relate to it. I always thought snakes were just so damn cool. I dig the way they move. Nothing moves as funky as a snake. I was like, dang, how can you be scared of it? Haven't you seen the way that thing, it's got the moves, man. It's rolling like a river. So,
Goodness.
and spiders have got that sort of presence that they can see in like almost 360 degrees. Imagine what it's like to see in 360 degrees.